Welcome, everyone. I am Danielle Hicks. I am Chief Patient Officer here at GoTo for lung cancer. Welcome to the Lung Cancer Living Room. It is a expert speaker series and support program that was built specifically with you in mind, bringing to you live and in real time conversations from experts from around the world, really talking to you about varying aspects of the disease. And we couldn't be more thrilled tonight to bring you something a little bit different. Typically in this meeting, we have conversations about the clinical aspects, the treatments, what's happening right now, what's coming down the pike and the like. But tonight, we're going to be having a conversation that's a little bit different than the clinical aspects. It's more about the emotional aspects and the big feelings, because big feelings come along with the cancer diagnosis. And at GoTo, we recently started a program called Mind Over Matter, which is designed specifically to help people understand and cope with some of the fears and anxieties and sadness, really, that come along with this disease. So tonight, we have with us two very special people that are going to speak with us tonight, both oncology social workers. Alison Sachs, who is an oncology social worker, Scientific Advisory Council at Triage Cancer. She's on the Medical Advisory Board at Zero Prostate Cancer and on the Global Advocacy Council here at GoTo for Lung Cancer. And we're thrilled to have Allie come and talk to us a little bit tonight. You're going to hear more about her story, her own diagnosis, and how that diagnosis has impacted the care that she gives to the patient that she serves. And then, of course, there's Sarah McHale, who is our Senior Manager of Support Programs and Implementation here at GoTo for Lung Cancer, also a licensed social worker and oncology social worker counselor. And she does lead our Mind Over Matter program, affectionately in-house called MOM. What we're really hoping that everyone walks away with tonight is an understanding, first and foremost, that the big feelings are real and they're okay, and more about the program, how it can help with some of that, and also, obviously, how to participate. So with that being said, Allie, we're going to start with you. Share your story a little bit about your diagnosis, and then I want to jump into the big feelings for you personally that came along with that.
Sure. So I was tasked as an oncology social worker with helping to open the Eisenhower Lucy Curci Cancer Center about 16 years ago. And one of the first things, as Sarah mentioned, that I was acutely aware of as an oncology social worker was the need for programs, education, information, and to look around and see what's happening, where is the biggest need. And the needs of the lung cancer community and lung cancer prevention and early detection jumped out right away first and foremost. So we did a little sleuthing around and found out about something called the ILCAC, the International Early Lung Screening Program. These physicians were getting together to say, look, just like when we find any other cancer, breast cancer was leading the way, colon cancer, we screen for those and find them early when they're most treatable and hopefully up statistical cure. So why are we doing that in lung cancer? Something's wrong. We are finding people at advanced stages. That's not good. The ILCAP's idea was to screen you starting at age 50 if you had a certain so much pack a day history of smoking, and to see, hey, are there nodules in those lungs? And if we follow that regularly and those nodules have a certain appearance or they grow, well, then we're going to be very suspicious for lung cancer and a biopsy may be indicated. Within 2 years of opening that program, I met all of the criteria, and they asked, would I please be screened? And I said, sure. I mean, I didn't smoke that much, and it was so many years ago, and I have no symptoms. I would be happy to. And they screened me, and I had nodules, and I was evaluated, and I had lung cancer. So now the next step was me. Okay, what do I do next?
How were you feeling when you first got the diagnosis, and what did you do next?
So Cancer in general, lung cancer in particular, is that diagnosis where people go, lung cancer, death. It's like there's no room in between those two bookends. And that's overwhelming. It certainly was overwhelming for me as a woman in her just about to start her 60s, and what was going to happen next. It's that feeling like all the air gets sucked out of the room. The rest of the world is fine. Everyone's going about their daily whatever. Your world has completely turned upside down. First thing is, am I going to live? Am I going to live? The next is, for me it was, and I hear this often in my work, how do I tell my loved ones? What do I say to them? Once all of that, I don't know what else. Listen, when I was diagnosed, I went home, I walked into my walk-in closet, and I sat down under the clothes in the closet. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. After that initial, the word for me was hysteria almost, even though it was outwardly wasn't, inwardly it was. It was then, okay, I got to figure out what to do next, and who lets me do that? What's my game plan? And I got to put my computer head on because I'm going to make some decisions. So that was, to me, that was the first 48 hours of hearing that diagnosis.
And within that first 48 hours, I can imagine that sort of the fears and anxiety and some of the questions you were asking your own self, like, how do I talk to my family about this? What does this mean for me? What does my life look like? Only sort of were exasperated as time went on. Like, yeah.
Well, yes and no. And of course, and for everyone listening in the room, it's a little different. I lived in the field. I worked in the field. I had quick access. I had the verbiage. I knew the language to speak. I knew the questions to ask. Most people don't know that. Once everything's settled and I had a plan, I had legs to move forward on that supported me, then I felt I could breathe at least a little. But let me tell you, I couldn't sleep at night. I for any of you newly diagnosed or facing the fear of recurrence, or that's a huge discussion to have with your team. For my team, it was, well, Allie, we can give you something to help with the anxiety or help with your sleep. And I was like, oh, no. And within a week, I was, oh, yeah, thank you very much. I do need that.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned, I mean, it's like these anxieties and these fears don't just start and end with the words, excuse me, you have cancer. They continue throughout, right? There's anxiety. There's the fear of recurrence. How did you kind of get through all of that?
For me, there wasn't a program. There wasn't Go-To Foundation. We are talking, thank you very much, 16 and a half, almost 16 years ago. So I had to create my own. And I can assure you, as you move forward, and I hate this term, but I'm going to use it anyway because I can't come up with another term than new normal. But here I was, a cancer patient now. That's not going to change. That never changes. So any of you that think it does, that's not true. It's a different feeling as we move through a cancer journey, through treatment, then into survivorship. And all these years later, I'm still a cancer survivor. If I cough too much, I'm like, oh, how come? That fear, it's not there every day. It's not there every week, you guys. When it's really there, we use the term anxiety. My sometimes annual, sometimes twice a year, depending on what my previous scan looked like. The week leading up to getting a CT scan to see what's going on in my lungs is extremely anxiety-provoking and a very fearful time. even after all of these years.
Yeah. But you had mentioned to me that at times either you or people that you have worked with have felt like they weren't allowed to be upset or have these feelings. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I agree 100%. And it's different times throughout, again, that cancer journey, and it can be very personal. First of all, of course, for me, again, as a professional, there were a lot of hurdles to jump over about how I was behaving, what I could say, what didn't I share in my work setting. But that not being allowed to be fearful or afraid often came from the people who loved me the most and cared about me the most. And it took a while for me to realize, first of all, I resented that. I'm the one with cancer, don't forget, not you. But it also took me a while to realize they wanted everything to be okay. And when the doctors were saying, hey, no more treatment, you're okay, they wanted to move on. Okay, let's go. Here we are. Life's good. See that, Al? You're great, Mom. You're a great daughter. You're a great wife. And I was over here going, oh, I'm not really great. I'm better. I'm thankful, but I'm not great. How come nobody knows I'm not great? And then again, turning to my social work colleagues, to support group, to learning meditation, learning yoga, learning mindfulness. When I go into that scan now, I play golf with my dad. I close my eyes, and before my head hits that little pillow on that scan bed, I'm already putting on my golf shoes and, getting my clubs out and walking to the first tee. That's my happy place. So there are, I don't mean tricks. It's just easy to say there are tricks to learn. There are tools. And that's, I think, what Sarah and her program are all about. Again, I had to go and find them for me.
Yeah.
A little bit of knowledge can be a wonderful thing, also be a dangerous thing, because I can read a scan. I can, read my reports and know exactly what they're saying. That's not a great thing all the time, but there really are ways to cope. They work better sometimes than others. And not just for you, but for those who love you as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I want to talk about that piece around not feeling allowed or like it was okay to express feelings of fear, sadness, anxiety, all of that. And I know, having talked to people and even in personal experience, I think there was, for my person, for her, I think it was more about not wanting to scare us. Everything for her needed to be okay as she was talking about things because she didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want to cause excess fear to her children or her husband or her friends or her extended family. And we're talking about my mom, Bonnie Adario. Everybody knows Bonnie Adario. And I think she's nodding her head like that. And I think that's sort of the flip side of that, right? There's one thing, that you sort of expressed one end of it, but the other end is the fear of generating fear for people you love, right? If I'm true to my feelings.
Said really well. I agree. That is the absolute other part of it. The problem when that happens is, it did for us in my family, and we had to really fix it. Is that then we're not communicating.
Yeah.
We're not talking. I don't want to upset them. I'm not, my youngest was, just out of college, just starting life. And I didn't, what am I going to say to him? I'm really afraid I'm going to die. I'm not going to see you get married. There was no way I was going to say that or say to my husband, you thought you married an older woman, a younger woman rather, that, would take care of you in your old age. Surprise. No.
Yeah.
no, I didn't want to use the great word. I didn't want to burden them.
Yeah.
And consequently, they didn't know how I felt. They went on with their lives. They had their own fears that because I didn't speak, they didn't feel permission to share. And, come on, that's like,
Yeah.
family therapy 101.
Yeah. And every family.
Yeah, so we have to fix that.
Yeah. Yeah. And every family's different, right? I think for me, in my personal experience, it became sort of more of a subliminal thing. Like we'd know, like without words being needed, like there's a moment and something's happening right now. And I remember days my sister and I would go over. This was shortly after surgery when we were trying to get her up and moving. And for those of you who don't know, she was diagnosed with stage 3B non-small cell adenocarcinoma, and originally told to get her affairs in order because she maybe had 6 months and there was really not a lot they could do. Here we are as of March 17th, 2025, 21 years later, and a whole lot of things accomplished in that time, particularly in this lung cancer community. She set out to prove them wrong. But with that being said, I think there were days when we'd go and be like, no, you're getting out of bed. We're just going to walk to the mailbox. It's not super far. We don't live on a farm. Like, it's just right out here. We're going to walk to the mailbox. And literally with, a couple of bleep words, like, get out of my room. I am not walking to the mailbox today. And we're like, okay, so a lot of that, I think, is different from family to family. Now, we were older, and my sister was still in her 20s. I was not, but my sister was. But I had my youngest kid was 2.5, and I was like, I had my own fears, sort of to your point. And I can imagine, I'm thinking about how hard it is when you've got adult children. But when we look right now at, lung cancer and who's being diagnosed, understanding that it's on the rise in women, particularly young women, a lot of whom have small children, that conversation and those feelings become even more complicated, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And I totally derailed there. I don't know, my train of thought. Grab your mic because I want to hear.
Having hope makes everything better.
Yeah.
So hope is just that word for me that makes everything all right.
Yeah, it's a quote we need to paint on the wall because hope does play a big role at some point in the journey, right? But it's being able to find it. And that's when people are struggling and having a hard time with these big feelings that come along with the diagnosis. This word gets harder and harder to find. So, Allie, go ahead.
I just want to jump in here, and I think this also is very cultural. It's very, where do you come from? How, how does your family express itself? What are your religious or non-religious beliefs? All of that ties into communicating and coping and the word hope. It truly does.
It really does. And into the choices people make about how they're going to manage or stuff, either express these fears and anxieties or stuff them down because the culture or their personal dynamic, that's just how they've been raised. And it is such a personal thing. No, you're right. What role do you, Allie, feel stigma has historically played in people diagnosed with lung cancer and them being sort of less likely historically to be the ones to reach out for this type of support around their fears and anxiety?
Well, look, us lung cancer patients know this, and us people, the minute you say you've had or have lung cancer, what's the first thing everyone says to you? First thing, did you smoke? With that look on their face, that judgmental, even if they don't mean it that way, that's how you hear it. And the truth is that non-smokers getting lung cancer is actually on the rise today. But yes, there's definitely a stigma. I mean, I think that's cultural in terms of cancer in general. Certain cultures are more open to speaking about medical issues or frailties or problems, whatever they are. But with lung cancer, it's almost finger pointing. It's almost the only cancer you can get that someone will say you gave that to yourself. Why'd you do that? Not always true, first of all. I think we're a more educated public, at least in the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, I don't know. We're more educated today to see how many lifestyles raise the risk of developing cancer, not just smoking. There are lots of obesity, on and on and on, exercise, etc. But it is still the only cancer still that people are kind of finger pointing about it. And that's a terrible stigma. And it really hurts when people do that. It really does.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And there's a lot of head nodding in the room, whether people smoked or not. The stigma has created sort of this world, and continues to your point, it's getting better, but it has created this world where, regardless of smoking status or smoking history, people feel that because of the close tie with it, especially if somebody does have a smoking history, they feel like, I don't deserve to be afraid. I don't deserve to be sad. I don't deserve to be anxiety ridden now or before a scan or at any time, because that shame blame sort of thing that stigma has created around lung cancer in particular. I think what I would love to hear about, and I would love our community to hear about, is how your own personal experience has impacted the work that you do with people who have been diagnosed with cancer.
Two big things always jump out at me when I talk about what it's like to have stayed in the field and be a cancer survivor. And the first is that I think it's made me softer and have more patience. And I'd like to believe I was pretty soft and had patience anyway. I'm a social worker. That's part of who we are. But I'm a New Yorker. New Yorkers tend to be a little fast and talk fast. I actually trained and did all of my undergraduate work and had a career focused on being in law enforcement. So I have a bit of an edge to me. So I like to think, one, that in general in my own life, as well as in my work, for some of us, when we are faced with our mortality, it's kind of a light bulb moment. Kind of, well, let me regroup. Let me remember what's important here. I'm not a cliche person, if you can't tell. I'm really not. But you know what? None of us gets out of here alive. None of us. Some people get hit by a bus, and I know we hear that a lot. And they're the lucky ones because they don't have the fear those of us who live with a cancer diagnosis have, or a heart disease diagnosis at this point, or other things. But the truth is that cancer wasn't a gift. I don't believe that. Not a gift. It didn't make me a better person. None of that for me is nonsense. No, I would have much preferred not to have had that surgery and that diagnosis. However, it did slow me down, and it did cause me to listen better and appreciate more, personally and professionally. And then professionally, for the first time since I walked out of graduate school at Michigan State University, go Spartans, since that day at 22 years of age and became an oncology social worker, I could finally say in groups that I facilitated, in one-on-one counseling, in speaking, yeah, I know what it feels like. I understand. I know what it means to hear the three words as you started the evening off with. No one ever wants to hear their doctor say, you have cancer. I get that. So you can stop trying to explain that part to me. Let's talk about other things, because I really do get that. Now I know how you feel. So I hope that's made me a better social worker. It certainly made me come to go-to as soon as I found out about you guys, and read about your mom and read about go-to all those years ago, and met some of your incredible social workers at oncology social work meetings, and went, yes is for me. What can I do? How can I be part of this family and this community? And let's make something worthwhile out of having lung cancer. If there's anything, it's go to. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Allie. And I mean, we really do consider ourselves a family here, and we couldn't be happier that you're a part of it. And I hear what you're saying about there's nothing like the lived experience, right? And as a patient support services team, and Sarah knows this, we talk about it all the time. And one of the reasons we're so incredibly passionate about meetings like this and gathering hope and mom is there's, I even felt this way when my own mom was diagnosed. And even with the people that I still talk to, I can speak with an empathetic ear, right? But I don't have the lived experience. And there's nothing quite like having a conversation, connecting with others in a community who have walked the walk. I mean, there just isn't. And I know everybody's different, and not everybody is comfortable in person or even on screen. Some people are comfortable on the phone. Some people are comfortable on the internet. We've got so many different options now to help serve people wherever they are in whatever way they most like to connect with people. And you've been such a huge part of helping us from an advisory standpoint, you and obviously others, to come to sort of that place where we have been able on many different platforms and levels to support the people that are diagnosed with this disease in our community that are truly family to us. So thank you so much. Sarah, I do want to jump to you. So you run GoTo's Mind Over Matter program. Again, Mom, it's what we all call it in-house. But can you tell us a little bit about this program, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. So Mind Over Matter is a 5-week psychoeducational coping skills program. And it's based in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and the physiology of the stress and relaxation responses. So it was originally developed in 2014 by Inova Peterson Life with Cancer in Northern Virginia. And I received my training on that program and facilitated this program there. And now we at GoTo offer it virtually and welcome anybody affected by lung cancer from anywhere in the United States to take the program with us.
So Sarah, we used a couple of big words there. Let's start with psychoeducational coping. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So it's emotional coping. Psychoeducational basically meaning it's educational in nature. We use things like PowerPoints or handouts, a little bit of lecture while it's still interactive. I want to make sure I stress that. But coming from the emotional or coping skills place.
Perfect. Cognitive behavioral therapy. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a therapy that really focuses on the connection between our thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and behaviors. So cognitive meaning thoughts related to how we're speaking to ourselves, and behavioral meaning the actions that we take in our daily lives.
And then along with that, we talked about acceptance and commitment therapy, which I think is a little more self-explanatory.
So acceptance and commitment therapy, the way that it's largely talked about in Mind Over Matter is through values, realizing what's important to you, what brings meaning to your life, and then how do you commit to those decisions to live out your values in the best way possible. And also that first word there, acceptance. So the idea of allowing or accepting normal big emotions like we've been talking about this whole evening. And I think sometimes talking about acceptance, you can have a different reaction to that word, right? Acceptance to some people is like, no, I don't accept this because I didn't want this. I didn't choose this. I heard Allie say earlier, like, this isn't a gift, So certainly sometimes switching that language can be helpful, of maybe allowing feels a little bit more comfortable. We didn't choose this. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want this. But how do we allow these big emotions to still exist with us so that we can manage and cope our way through what we're dealing with?
We don't want to end up a puddle on the floor, non-functional. The whole idea of this is to allow them so that you can deal with them, to not be afraid of them. And if you let a professional like Sarah and her team in the MOM program show you the steps, then I always say that, don't worry, we won't let you be a puddle on the floor. And if you are, it's okay, because guess what? We put it right back together and walk out the door. And it'll be okay. I think that's, a lot of people are fearful of some of that stuff, Sarah, because they're like, well, what happens if I fall apart? What do you do with me then?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's true. And I think, just to touch on, because it's the second time it's come up and it's made me giggle a little bit each time. And not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but the cancer was not a gift. And I think people can take it from one extreme to the other, and it really is about whatever works for them. And I think this program does help to identify what will work for you as a person, as an individual. And it's really no different than how we talk about personalized medicine from a clinical standpoint these days, right? Like, you should be talking to a healthcare provider who's going to treat you as an individual who has been diagnosed with XYZ type of lung cancer, not as just like XYZ type of lung cancer, right? But an individual. And it's the same thing when we're talking about helping people to not only identify and cope with not only to identify what some of the stressors are, the anxieties are, but to help give them the tools to overcome them.
Yes. And in Mind Over Matter, we purposely provide a variety of different tools, not because we think every tool is going to work for you, but more so find the ones that do. To your point, this personalized piece, the right match, the best fit. Maybe this doesn't work, but maybe something later in the session or next week is going to click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah, love to use the term, the psychoeducational part, because, for me, education is such a huge part of learning to cope and process and deal with all the fear, because the biggest fear for most of us in general is fear of unknown. And, I used to say getting diagnosed with cancer is like being dropped in a foreign country. You don't speak the language and nobody gave you a map. And so to have a program that also is this educational piece, supportive piece that gives you the verbiage and the understanding of what it's all about, and how then you take that and you bring it to your healthcare team. You learn to talk about it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. Sarah, you mentioned the physiology of the stress and relaxation response. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those are?
Yes. So how we react to stress, or our stress response, is also called the fight or flight response, which, maybe some more folks are familiar with. It's that quick burst of energy that goes through your whole body when you think that you're in danger. And the reason why this is important and included in Mind Over Matter is because it's evolutionary, meaning it has a real purpose. It's our body's effort to keep us safe from what we think is a threat. So we talk a little bit about this idea that maybe not all stress is bad. We fall into the pattern of labeling emotions as bad or good, positive or negative. But when we think about that, maybe the stress has a purpose to keep us safe or vigilant, get us to our doctor's appointments, call that to make that scan appointment. That's that role that comes in. And we do know that stress becomes a little bit more of a concern when it becomes chronic, right? Meaning long lasting or continuous, instead of these burst responses that I'm talking about. And that's why we talk about how to manage stress. because in the same way that we have a stress response, we also have a relaxation response. And the tools in Mind Over Matter help us incite or spark that relaxation response, telling the body that we are safe and we can relax in the moments that we have the opportunity to do so.
I really love that explanation because I think people can relate to it even outside of a diagnosis, right? We've all had that fight or flight feeling at some point in our lives, regardless of our clinical or medical status. And we've all had experiences that are incredibly relaxing for one reason or another. And what might be a soothing, relaxing experience for someone might not be for another. And that's where the personalized piece comes in. And we're going to dive now a little bit into how mom works. What does that look like sort of in action?
Yeah. So Mind Over Matter, it can help people manage those big emotions. We've spent time talking about the stress, sadness, worries, fears by adding tools to their toolbox. So the program meets 5 weeks in a row, 90 minutes per session, and we cover different concepts and skills like what I was talking about earlier, building the awareness and gaining a better understanding of how our thoughts, feelings, what we feel in our body, and how we behave are all connected. We also talk through clarifying what your own personal values and strengths are, so then we can use those to find more new helpful thoughts or perspectives. And then those relaxation practices that I've alluded to a little bit, breathing exercises, relaxation practices, meditations to pause when these times of stress come up. So it functions different from a support group, as you can imagine, because support groups are largely open discussion, whereas as we've been talking about, this is more structured or educational in nature, but it's still very interactive. It's in a group environment where people can connect with others and share similar experiences with each other, which we know is so important for so many.
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to ask, because have people expressed sort of concerns over being, because you're vulnerable in this type of position or these types of conversations, particularly in a group setting with people that you don't necessarily know. Is there like a sort of, for lack of a better term, like a meet and greet that sort of leads up to this to make people feel more comfortable? And what about those people who might not? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of our registration or sign-up process, we've started having welcome calls. And these welcome calls are brief video calls for us, the facilitators, to talk through what the program really is or isn't, and hear from participants about what they're hoping to get out of the program. So these welcome calls help us find out if this Mind Over Matter program is a good fit at that time or not. What I hear most often from folks is actually that people are striving for this connection. And I've even heard people say, I've joined other support groups before, but it's so medical focused. The conversation is so focused on treatments and clinical trials. And while all of that is obviously extremely important, they're searching for this space to talk about these emotional elements of how they're coping and what they could add to their toolbox. So I would say I hear that more often than not. But to your point, if that's not something that someone's looking for or not comfortable yet, GoTo has many other support programs that may be a better fit, something like the Phone Buddy program, which is one-on-one peer support, or calling the helpline to talk with our team members. So that's all part of the welcome calls.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Do these tools help? I mean, is there data to show that these tools help with the intensity of these big feelings, the anxiety and the fears?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's early data that showed that there was a significant decrease in anxiety, depression, and physical symptom severity after participating in Mind Over Matter. And coming just from a facilitator experience, we also talk about decreasing the intensity of emotions within the group. So we talk about how it's not necessarily the goal to eliminate these emotions, that there is going to be anxiety or fears. These are normal. But instead using something like a 0 to 10 intensity scale, like the pain scale maybe you've heard at the doctor's office, to show that maybe after using a tool, the anxiety is still there, but it went from an 8 down to a 4.
Yeah, which is huge. So we talked a little bit about the registration process, the welcome calls, is this a good fit or not? But what we do know is that this type of programming might not be right for everyone, because there's something called situational versus clinical sort of depression or anxiety. And this is built really for the situational piece, correct?
Right.
And that, can you talk a little bit about how that is also part of the, intake process or however you want to describe it?
Yeah, so sometimes additional support is needed, and we understand that. Mind Over Matter is a coping skills group. It's not therapy. It's not medical advice. It's a coping skills group. So the welcome calls are that good place to talk about if that additional support is needed, maybe outside referrals, referring back to their treatment center or individual care. Or like I mentioned earlier, referring to other go-to programs if ultimately that's just a better fit. But these tools are going to be new and feel new. And just like with any new skill, they take practice to learn and to be helpful.
You're an LCSW?
Yes.
So I think it's important for folks to understand what that means. It means you are trained, you took many hours over years training in being able to do a complete assessment so that you and your colleagues with LCSWs can determine what is going on. And if there is more of a clinical or serious depression, you will see it. That is your training, and move someone to the appropriate help that they might need or support. Just wanted to point that out.
Oh, I appreciate that. And that's right. We want everybody to get the support that's going to be the best fit for them.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Allie. It is so important because at GoTo, we also take a personalized approach. We want to make sure that whatever services we are providing or that we are referring you to are right for you. So I think it's a really, really valid point. Finally, Sarah, why do you think, or why is programming like MOM important?
Mind Over Matter is very important, particularly in the lung cancer community, because we find that people with lung cancer have higher levels of distress, higher levels of unmet physical and emotional needs. And depending on where people receive their care, there can be a lack of access to services or programs like this. And even if the services and programs are there, there can be barriers to accessing them. So GoTo offering Mind Over Matter can help to fill this gap. And as we've talked about this evening, its goals are really to strengthen coping skills, decrease distress, and support the resiliency of people impacted by lung cancer.
Is there a fee?
There is not.
All of GoTo's patient support services, programs, and education are free to any and all diagnosed loved ones, extended family members, and the like. So, you'll hear me at the end talk a little bit and give a lot of thanks to the folks who helped make that possible. But we couldn't be more proud or honored, really, to be able to provide what I believe, some might say my opinion's biased, but what I truly believe, and I know others do as well, are top-notch, programming, education, and support services to patients that we can deliver to them wherever they are and whenever the need exists. So thanks for the shout out, Allie. One final question, and Allie, I'll start with you. What do you most hope folks watching this programming will take away from this conversation?
To not be afraid or hesitate to ask for help. To say, I'm not doing okay, or I'm not doing great. It could be just today. It could be just this week. It could just be this month. It doesn't mean you're stuck there, but it also doesn't mean you have to drown there. There is help. Go2 has help. Your oncology social workers that you hopefully have access to where you're treated. It's so important to understand you do not have to walk this journey alone. And may I say, with programs like MOM, don't forget these skills are transferable. They're not just skills for cancer coping. These are life skills that will see you through, because we all have trauma in our lives. Cancer is a trauma. There will be others. That is what life is, ups and sometimes downs. So take these skills with you and take advantage of them. They're yours for the taking. You just have to ask.
Thanks, Allie. Sarah, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say mine is really similar. I hope that people take away that it's normal to feel how they're feeling. It's normal to feel like these emotions are bigger and stronger than maybe they've experienced before. And it's common for them to come up after a diagnosis, treatment, survivorship, waiting, scans, right? These are all normal periods of emotion. And like Allie was saying, that support is available, whether it's our newest program, Mind Over Matter, or the existing support programs that Go2 has had for a long time. Our team is here to connect you with whatever you feel like is best for you.
Yeah, I echo what both of you said, and I can't thank either of you enough for coming and having this important conversation with us tonight. Sort of an outside of the box conversation compared to the clinical stuff, but one of you said it earlier, there's a lot of information out there to be found on the clinical aspects of this disease, and not a lot or not enough about the emotional aspects of it. So thank you both so much for coming and talking with us. Thank you all again, Allie, Sarah, for coming and speaking with us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you guys join us for this conversation. All of you watching live, those of you who will come back and watch post-live, Penn Media for coming in and setting up all this camera and this lighting so you guys can all hear us as we are giving these presentations. Michelle Zay for monitoring and managing the logistics in the back end and all of the things that go into bringing this programming to you. And then the supporters that I mentioned earlier: Amgen, AstraZeneca, Bayer, Boehringer Ingelheim, Bristol Myers Squibb, Daiichi Sankyo, Eisai, Foundation Medicine, Genentech, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Mirati Therapeutics, Novartis, Novocure, Regeneron, Sanofi, and Takeda Oncology. Without them, this type of programming would not be possible. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.
So I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're